Hey, what is up? Welcome to this episode of the Entrepreneur to Entrepreneur podcast. As always, I'm your host, Brian Lofrumento, and I already know how much all of you listeners around the world love this story of an entrepreneur that is not tackling a small problem, but is solving a societal problem to make the world a better place. And that is exactly what today's guest and fellow entrepreneur is doing, because this is something that we're all going to face it sooner rather than later. We're all going to face the situation where we are serving the caregiver role, whether it's formally, whether it's informally, whether it's someone in our family or a loved one. It's something that we're all faced with, and gosh, are there so many considerations along the way. But fortunately, technology can help us more now better than it ever has before. And that's why I love the fact that today's guest is at the heart of that. Let me introduce you to her. Her name is Rukmini Banerjee. Rukmini is the founder of CuroNow, which is a mobile app solution designed to reduce cognitive overload for family caregivers supporting aging loved ones. Rukmini brings over 2 decades of executive leadership experience to her entrepreneurial journey. Before starting her company, CuroNow, she served as the Chief Operating Officer at Vouch, an insurtech startup, and as Chief People Officer at Fetch Rewards, which is a consumer saving app for the last few years, helping to scale and grow both companies. Throughout her career, she's worked across countries, across continents. She's worked in the United States, Australia, and India, where she's consistently demonstrated a remarkable ability to deliver operational excellence while championing diversity and inclusion initiatives. What makes her current venture particularly compelling is how she's applying her system thinking approach to solving growing societal challenge, supporting, I love this term, we're definitely going to talk about her ideal clients and who she serves, the sandwich generation, who are juggling careers, children, and caring for aging parents. This is going to be an insightful one. I think we're all really going to love hearing the way that Rukmini thinks about things, so I'm not going to say anything else. Let's dive straight into my interview with Rukmini Banerjee. All right, Rukmini, I am so very excited that you're here with us today. First things first, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Brian, and really appreciate being on this show.
We appreciate you being here, especially because it's such an exciting time in your business. There's such an exciting time in technology and what it's enabling, real life societal problems. Before we jump straight into that stuff, though, take us beyond the bio. Who's Rukmini? How'd you start doing all these cool things?
That is such a large question. I am based out of the Midwest in Madison, Wisconsin. I am a mom of twins who are going to go into middle school. I am a mom of a dog. I am the wife of a university professor. I have been working for about 30 years in large companies, startups. I've lived in multiple countries. I am just a curious person. And one of the things that, and I keep telling my kids, never let go of curiosity. And I think that's kind of what has been the arc of my journey from where I started with a maths grad at college and then to now startup entrepreneur in the caregiving tech space.
Yeah, I love that overview. I've got to ask you, because obviously everyone has their own origin story. What I'm always fascinated by, you didn't just have the idea, you decided to take action. What was that moment like? What made you go from thinking about this to actually saying, I'm going to be the one that starts it and takes this massive action?
So last year, I transitioned out of my last role. And then I took time off. I traveled with the family extensively through summer. I come back Labor Day, and now I start networking, going, what's the next thing to do? And I always have, as I said, I always have a very wide net of what are all the things out there? Where can I contribute the most? Where can I learn the most? And as I'm talking with people, I kid you not, within the first 10, 15 minutes of every conversation, it goes towards the stress this person is having because they've got a busy life. They've got kids, probably, back to that sandwich generation thing. And now their parents or their in-laws or their aunts or their uncles are aging. And how do they stay on top of that? Where is that extra brain capacity Where are the extra hours in the day to help with this additional stress? So that got me thinking. My parents live in Australia. My dad's going to turn 90 next year. My mom's going to turn 85. They live with my sister. She is the primary caregiver for them. So I have a little bit of insight into what being part of a family that needs to provide caregiving, but I am that sibling that is not there to help in the day-to-day. But how do I still stay connected? Or how do I know that help is needed, that I should do something? So all of that came together. I went looking for what's out there so I could help my friends. And interestingly, I found nothing that is holistic. Like, there are a lot of solutions. They address little pieces of the tasks that are needed to be done. Most of them are health-centric, which is a very big part of this. But as giving the example, just because my mom has had a stroke and has had cancer doesn't mean she doesn't need her hair cut anymore. Doesn't mean that she doesn't need to go out and try out some dresses and shop when the seasons change and she needs fresh clothes. So where is that solution that helps us see this person holistically? This is the full person. These are all their needs. Yes, health has taken over with age, a big chunk of what they need, but that's not everything. That doesn't define them as people. And I found nothing. There was nothing that was obvious to me that this helps address all of that, which is why I am very prone to action kind of person. So I'm sitting with my husband over dinner and I go, so why don't I do something about it? And he goes, okay, try, go do it. So that's literally how this came about.
Yes, I love that backstory, especially because I feel like even in hearing the way you articulate these things, it really reveals that unique positioning in the marketplace that CuroNow fills. Because you're right. I mean, you so correctly called out the health aspects. Of course, that is a big problem and a big concern and a big consideration when it comes to aging people in our family, whatever capacity that looks like. But what I really appreciate about your business, and you kind of alluded to it there, is reducing cognitive overload. You and I were talking off the air about twins. You obviously are the mom of twins, and I, just as an uncle of twins, my niece and nephew are 7-year-olds, I realize what cognitive load really means when you're responsible for children in particular. The past few days when I've been hanging out with them, Rukmini, I haven't had any time to think for myself. And so I love that has played into the way that CuroNow functions. Is it's an assistant. It takes that stress off of our minds. Introduce listeners to that, because I teased it just a little bit, but I think that's such a unique and important role that CuroNow fills in that marketplace.
Yeah, and that's one of the main central themes of the purpose of, let me take a step back, Brian. Let me tell you how I think about this elder care space, which is like a massive space, not just in the US, worldwide. The populations are aging at a very, very fast rate. People are living longer thanks to medicinal progression and all of that. But there are three, if I think about a Venn diagram, there are three kind of things people need as they age, to age and have a better quality of life, right? There are services they need, people who can come and help them with things. There are communities they need, people like me who understand my journey, who can help me when I get stuck. And then there are tools. And the tools part, historically has not been addressed beyond physical tools. Like I need to make my home safer and less prone to falls and all of that. So people have those digital tools because we don't associate old age with digital tools necessarily, but I am going to be that 65-year-old person in 1.5 decades. So I am not going to suddenly forget what I know about digital tools. So the population is getting younger from that perspective. People are much more okay with the internet. People have smartphones. That's become like a part of life, right? So that's the focus. The tool part is a focus. And within tools, what is it that we are trying to solve first and foremost is reducing the cognitive load. And there are 5 strategies to reduce cognitive load. One is organizing and planning tasks. 2 is delegating tasks. Very little can be done all by one person. It takes a village. 3, as soon as you have other people involved, is communication effectiveness. Am I asking the right things at the right time in the right way? Am I hearing the right things at the right time in the right way? Contextual knowledge. Am I able to take in what else is relevant to this task at hand? And the 5th is monitoring changes. Do I know when things are changing? Am I aware when things go beyond? It's like in a very, I've studied science. I'm a science student, and it's like control charts. There are always going to be fluctuations and change. When do you know this change needs an action versus this change is just normal? So those are kind of the 5 things that we are trying to figure out how best to bring it all together and help solve for.
Yeah, I love that. Especially, I'm a big fan of frameworks. It allows us to structure our thinking. And so many creative people that I've interviewed here on the show, it's so fascinating. I always am fascinated by creatives, and I always end up asking them, how do I facilitate more creativity in my thought process? And a lot of them say it actually starts with constraints. It doesn't start with a blank piece of paper. Is that if I say, oh, I'm only allowed to use 2 colors, let's say black and red, and those are the rules, now I'm going to have to creatively come up with a solution within those given constraints. And I think that that's so interesting because we think about that blank piece of paper, whereas you see this whole opportunity to creatively solve a huge problem, Rukmini. And hearing you talk about that, where my head goes is, of course this is needed in the marketplace. We have tools like Asana. We have tools like Trello. We have all of these tools in a business sense. How have we arrived at this place societally where you call it the sandwich generation? I'd love for you to talk about this unique moment in time. How have we arrived at this place where there's an eldering and an aging population, but none of those specialized tools in order to do these things? Talk to us about that macro landscape so then we can really hone in on your thinking, because I've kind of teased somewhere where I want to go with it, but paint the picture of how we've got here in this macro landscape.
Yeah, let me start with a stat. So there are about 60 million Americans right now who we deem to be the sandwich generation. Like, that's almost a quarter. It's 23% of the population. And what we mean by that sandwich generation is people who are taking care of minors, children, or sometimes more and more there are people who are financially still helping out their early 20s children. So they have responsibilities towards children, and they have responsibilities towards their prior generation, so the elder population. So that's why we're calling the term, it's a very visual term, the sandwich generation, right? And the macro, how has this become so big, and how is it becoming bigger? As I just mentioned, I think there are medical science is progressing really, really fast and really well, like fantastic. People are living longer. Longevity is going up, right? More and more people are wanting to age at home. The whole in the 60s, 70s, the vibe of retirement communities and a glass of wine at 4 o'clock with my dinner and friends there, that's starting to lose its attraction a little bit. And COVID did not help, because at that time, people started understanding how much staying farther away from their loved ones gets in the way sometimes when you cannot have constant contact. So more and more people want to age at home, which has increased the responsibility, which yesterday I could have outsourced completely to a retirement home. Today, now as an adult child, I have to ensure certain needs are met. And the other thing is people are also marrying and having kids a little later as well. So that group in the middle is just a big, big number right now.
Yeah, it's so interesting because these are just demographics. I mean, it actually is something that has been predictable based on the way that our population is aging. And this, quite frankly, obviously you and I are based in the United States. This is a global problem, is that every country's facing this. And that's why I really teased at the top of today's episode is that you're tackling a huge societal issue. And with that said, one thing that I'm really excited about to tap into your mind is, of course, AI. Because when we talk about huge societal issues, AI, I hope, and I'm pretty confident, is going to assist us in a more beneficial way solving these big problems. How's it factoring into, I guess, not just the current with what it is that you're developing and deploying inside of your mobile app, but even in the future? I'm sure that your mind is racing with all different sorts of AI applications. What's that looking like in your head these days?
I think so. AI, to me, AI is such a buzzword, and AI can mean so many different things. And the application of AI is where the value is, right? And forever, this whole digital revolution and this digital space has been around. How do we make tasks easier? How do we automate things we don't need to? I'm also a Lean Six Sigma black belt. So forever we've talked about non-value added work that can I automate, can I eliminate that, right? So what AI is doing is, with the LLMs now in play, because it can read, it can apply some logic based on historical decisions and historical actions taken, has really opened up the possibility of what we could do with that contextual knowledge. If I have some information, and it doesn't also need to be just mine, but it is more powerful when it is my history and my data and my information. If you understand me and you understand my needs in the context of a community or millions of other people who have had similar needs, what can you then quickly tell me or do for me that before I would have needed to trawl through or ask people or find organizations? So that is what I see as the value and the benefit of AI, especially in this space.
Yeah, so well said. I think these are questions. I mean, you kind of alluded to it in the fact that we're all trying to make sense of how AI can make our lives easier. Too often we think about it as a task assistant, but really it is that underlying logic that I think so many of us can lean on. And it leads me right into, I kind of teased it a few minutes ago about the fact that I love hearing the way that creatives think. Well, Rukmini, you are a systems thinker, and you talk about Six Sigma. All of these different things play into the way that you see the world. And of course, that plays into the way that you develop, deploy, and grow and scale your business. What is system thinking approach? What does that look like? How's that factored into the way that you've structured your business?
So systems thinking, to me, very simply, is understanding that I start with something, input, I want something at the end, output, and what is happening in the middle, the throughput. And really what we control is not the output. What we control is the input and the throughput. The quality of what goes in and how effective and efficiently I deal with it in the middle will determine what I get out at the end. And that's like, you can apply it to anything. You can apply it to my kids and their learning and how they're growing up, right? It's the input is the effort they put in. The input is the talent they're bringing to the table. The input is also the interest they have in something, right? And I'm thinking that they're both learning piano, and their output is distinctly different. And the two of them, as I said, they're twins, and it's like a science experiment. They started learning piano at the same age. It's the same teacher. They come home, so it's the same environment. The teacher comes home, and they have taken exactly the same number of lessons, and they have progressed, right, for the last 4 or 5 years, and their trajectories are very different. And the inputs going into it is their innate talent, their interest in playing piano, because what that does is the more interested you are, the more you're practicing, the better you are. So that's the throughput, the practice part. Then the process is how they're being taught, how much effort and time they are putting in. That's the throughput. And you add all of this, that will control who is going to continue and be really good at this versus for who this will just be a nice hobby to say at a dinner conversation, oh yeah, I used to play Clair de Lune on the piano before.
Yeah, it's cool thinking about really the way that you phrase that, those throughputs. That's a fun part for all of us to solve in our own businesses, regardless of where we are. So I can see, because it's easy to think about the outputs. It's easy to think about what we want. We don't necessarily get to control the outputs in life, in business, in so many aspects. If you and I want to have 1 million followers on social media, I don't think either of us need that. But if that's what we wanted, we can't control that output, but it is those throughputs. It is the inputs. I love the way that you talk about that. Rukmini, you talk about curiosity, and I'm going to pick on that for a second because I'm going to selfishly be a little bit curious here on the air. I'm a first-generation American. I'm the son of an immigrant mom, and so that cultural upbringing has factored so much into the way that I see the world. When I look at your career arc, when I look at your personal life, I would imagine that that plays even more heavily into the type of work that you do, and especially the problem that you've chosen to tackle, because it's clear to me that family is very important to you, and I think culturally that's something that was ingrained in you, but I also think personally it seems like a very important personal value of yours. How much has that global approach played into the way that you're operating as an entrepreneur? Because the US, Australia, India, very different places, a lot of similarities, but also a lot of cultural differences. How has all that played into the way that you think and the way that you operate?
That is actually a very very logical question, but a very hard question. It's hard for me to separate out and say, this is the impact India has had on me. This is the impact Australia has had on me. This is the impact America has had on me. And hard to say, this is the impact my family has had on me versus this company versus that company, right? All of that together determines who I am as a person and what I value and how I show up to the world. But I will have to say, and I give this advice to whoever I speak with, if they're interested, is you have to, at some point in your life, experience being a minority in something. And it could be race, it could be nationality, it could be gender, woman in technology, it could be age. I am a young person sitting at this table with everyone above 60. It could be I am a vet and nobody else in this interest sphere has that experience. But you have to, in some way, experience not being that loudest voice, the main common stream voice in the room, to understand the journey of somebody else in a similar situation. And that, I think, has driven a lot of who I am as a person, how I approach curiosity, which is why curiosity is so important. Like, I'll give you another example. Like, when my kids were 5 years old, I think they were 4.5, about to turn 5. It's the age when they would have moved from preschool to the school system, right? The 4K. And my husband, he's a computer science professor. So every 7 years or so, he gets a year of sabbatical where he can work and live somewhere else. And we chose to take the family and move to Europe for that year. We were in Paris for the first semester. We were in Madrid for the second semester. My kids went to the local preschool in Paris. Nobody spoke English. Everybody spoke French. Our kids did not understand nor speak a word of French. I know nothing. My husband can kind of get along, but we needed interpreters even to get them into the school. But it was a 6-minute walk. And the kids adjusted and they were fine. They were 4.5 years old. They needed to know where the potty was. They needed to know when the meal break was. And they had friends. They had best friends. I'm walking along the street. I got to tell you the story. Sunday, I'm walking, holding my 2 little kids, their hands, walking along the sidewalk near the school. And there's a lady approaching with a little girl towards us. And when they came close to us, my daughter goes and hugs that other girl, and the girl hugs her back, and then we move on. no words were spoken, nothing. We just moved on. So I asked her, I said, who was that? She goes, that's Tiffany. I said, who's Tiffany? She goes, my friend in school, my best friend. I said, oh, how come you didn't even say hello? You didn't talk to her. She goes, we don't talk. We play. That was like a story that still stays in my, like, approaching and understanding people despite our differences. I mean, this is a born in France, young French girl. Mine is a first generation American born in the US. So many differences, but the innate being a child and being thrown into the room for X hours a day, they got to play and they made friends. So that's a big part of my approach to everything is, yes, there are differences between two people, you and me, but there are also similarities. And how do we understand? How do we uncover? How do we empathize? And how do we work on what needs to be worked on, taking into account the difference and the similarity, because they both are a strength. If we were all exactly the same, just how boring would that be?
Yes, my goodness, who thought the huge takeaway from today's episode is what your daughter said? We don't need to talk, we play, and so much of life. Rukmini, here you and I are talking about a tech company that you've started, but I feel like that story brings it back to the most important part of your company, which is, of course, that human element. And when I look at you really nailed it. I knew that asking you that super broad question and part philosophical question would bring out that uniquely human trait that's inside of all of us. Because when I look at all of your background and your experience, chief operating officer, chief people officer, here you are solving a societal problem using the business strategies and the tactics that, of course, can help us build something that's sustainable and can reach a lot of people. But at the heart of it is really that uniquely human experience. So I want to squeeze in 2 more questions. I knew time would fly by with you today, but I do want to pick on that professional background because the operations part of it, the people part of it, we've obviously talked at length how much that plays into what it is that you do now, but you're doing it now as an entrepreneur, which is a bit of a difference there. What has the entrepreneurial life been like for you? What's been what you expected, and what's been something that's really surprised you along the way?
Oh my God, that's a great question, Brian. So I'm on this journey for 6-7 months now. And what has been amazing, and this is kind of one of the main reasons why I wanted to jump in as well, is it's the purpose-driven part of it, right? Like every decision we're making, we're going back to, and I say we very broadly, I'm the one and only full-time person working on this. Everybody else is helping me out right now, part-time. But it's a big group of people. And why are they helping me out? Why are they taking precious hours in their time and helping work on this? It's because of the purpose. It resonates with people. They're getting something out of it as they're doing it. And that has been the best thing as we're building this. The other thing is I understand business. I've been around in startups, hyper growth startups, and big companies, established companies, who have been in the business in Fortune 100 lists, right? So I understand the business elements. So that part has been fun and easy. The part that I knew it would be different, but experiencing it has really hammered it in, is this feeling of I have to build something from absolute scratch. And the fun of that is there are so many degrees of freedom. I can choose to do and go whichever way I want to, but that makes decision-making so critical because otherwise it's going to be chaos. So how do I pick and choose and how do I go get this vision understood by people who can actually make a difference and invest in this so that we can move to that next step?
Boom. That's the reality, Rukmini. Honestly, what I'm hearing, I'm just like, you just summed up entrepreneurial life because we can understand this conceptually, but you're living in it. Is there something you want to add there?
No. I think it's fascinating and fantastic.
Yeah, I love it. And I will say, I love the fact that you went right to that decision making, because that, of course, is a very different thing. However, I feel like you dropped a huge clue on us right there, and that your decision making is purpose driven. And it actually seems to me like that's the perfect thing to fall back on, is when you're at that fork in the road, whether it's literally or proverbially, you fall back on, how does this move our purpose forward? How do we get closer to what our purpose actually is? So, gosh, I love hearing those decision trees that you have in your head and how you're navigating them and all those degrees of freedom, because that's the truth of it. And you're responsible for those big decisions, which is why I'm going to ask you to impart this final question on our listeners. What is that one piece of advice that you want to leave our listeners with, knowing that we're being listened to by both entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs at all different stages of their own growth journeys, and also knowing that you are one of us as a fellow entrepreneur yourself who's already dropped so much knowledge on us in today's episode. Your daughter has as well, and I'm appreciative of that story. But Rukmini, with all of that in mind, what's that one piece of advice that you want to leave our listeners with today?
Take action. I think it's very obvious, but I think sometimes we are so fearful of what's going to be. What if this doesn't work? And you won't know. None of us will know. We won't know until we try and we take that one step forward. Then reassess, then take the next step. And if you need to just shift a little bit, do that. That's fantastic. But you wouldn't have been able to shift 3 times by the time you get to step 10 had you not taken step 1. And I think that is probably young to old entrepreneurs or any artists or anybody. Take action would be my best advice.
Oh, and as a visual person, I personally really appreciate the visual that you have assigned to that, because obviously it's advice that we've heard on various levels, but that real visual of you talking about there can't be a step 10. There can't be that turning point if we haven't actually taken action with that step 1. Rukmini, that's the first time I've heard anyone articulate it that way, and I'm so appreciative of that advice that you've shared with our listeners. I'm very excited for all of them to check out the very important work that you're doing. You and I talked off the air about how exciting of a time this is in your business, and obviously you've built out this app and you're looking to scale it and grow it and really make a huge difference with a massive societal problem that we're all facing. So Rukmini, with all of that in mind, for listeners who do want to check out your business and all the great stuff that you're up to, drop those links on us. Where should listeners go from here?
Please check out our website, www.curonow.com. That's CURONOW. And sign up for our wait list. We are right now at beta launch. And as soon as we have something open to the public, we'll be there to help you and be with you on your way.
Yes, and to reduce that cognitive load, which is so important, especially all of you listeners. I know that your cognitive load is probably higher than average with all the millions of business ideas running around your head. So definitely check out that link down below in the show notes. If you're driving, if you're at the gym, if you're on the go, if you are wrangling a set of twins as you're going about your day, no worries. We're dropping that link down below. You don't have to remember the spelling or anything, so definitely check that out wherever you're tuning in. Otherwise, Rukmini, on behalf of myself and all the listeners around the world, thanks so much for coming on the show today.
Thank you so much, Brian, and thank you, listeners, for giving me precious time today.